There is more stuff going on when it comes to Shadows, and at this point, it's getting ridiculous how much online discourse keeps coming out of this game and the various fights that it's causing across the internet. There's been an outcry claiming that if you dislike Shadows for not being historically accurate, that you are the problem. And there's people just straight up spreading misinformation and wrong facts about Assassin's Creed that I want to clear up so more people can understand. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll understand why the things in this video that are causing the outrage in the first place are such a big problem. So please, give me some of your time to explain all of this to you in as much detail as I can. So Shadows has rightfully caused a lot of issues for a lot of people. This time, the now viral clip of Yasuke desecrating the temple with his attacks has caught the ire of online influencer types, and it's causing a problem within a problem of itself. Fandom Wire did an article on this too, which is titled, "You Literally Control the Buttons You Press, Assassin's Creed Shadows Backlash, Yasuke Destroying Japanese Shrine Ignores Pope Brawl from Assassin's Creed 2. There's this gotcha, so to speak, that people are trying to push, claiming that you don't have to destroy the temple and the monuments within Shadows and it's up to the player. While, like anything else, things are up to player choice, it's the fact of how Ubisoft has implemented this against their other games within the series. Then there was this one tweet by this guy named Black Hokage, who I'm pretty sure was a part of the G4 Tech TV revival, and was a yes man for people like Frost when she single-handedly destroyed that entire network with her feminist rant. Actually, let me check if this is the same guy. Yeah, this is the same guy, I knew it, a paid shill that cheerleadered for Frost when she did that whole feminism in gaming rant. Alright, this already tells me where this is going anyway, but here's what he tweeted about Shadows. The force hate for this game has reached comedic levels. You, the player, chose to do that so you can push your agenda. Now you all care about religion. You kill the Pope in Assassin's Creed 2. Where was the anger then? Real life losers." Hey Black Hokage, way to openly admit that you never played Assassin's Creed before because you're wrong in every sense. Let me explain why. Firstly, you can't stand there claiming to be on some high horse when you shilled for someone like Frost, and was on programs being paid with known grifters like the Completionist with his now infamous charity scams. But beyond that, you didn't play Assassin's Creed 2, did you? Because if you did, you would know that what you just said was factually incorrect in every single way. You don't kill the Pope in Assassin's Creed 2. I guess spoilers for Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood specifically here, but I have to speak on this because it's important. You defeat the Pope in Assassin's Creed 2 at the end, and then you meet Minerva, but you do not kill him. It's also very clearly stated that Rodrigo Borgia, that's the Pope's name in the game, was clearly aligned with the Templars the entire time. And the entire game, as in Assassin's Creed 2 I'm talking about here, is about Ezio killing his way up the food chain to eventually reach the corruption that caused his family to die, which is, yeah, the Pope, Rodrigo. Anyway, you don't kill this guy in Assassin's Creed 2, which Black Hokage says you do, and you would know that if you played the game, which clearly you didn't, but are still claiming to do anyways. Which shouldn't really surprise me considering this is an industry shill guy, but also you would know that when Rodrigo actually does die, Ezio isn't the one that does it. In fact, in Brotherhood, it's his own blood, Cesare Borgia, who becomes power drunk on finding the Apple of Eden that ends up being the one to kill Rodrigo. Cesare takes a bite from an apple while speaking to Rodrigo in his quarters, and unbeknownst to Cesare, the apples on display are in fact all poison to kill Cesare if he eats enough of it. Eventually, during this scene, Cesare is notified of the treachery to kill him, and Cesare, in his rage, forces the poisoned apple into Rodrigo's mouth, causing him to fall over on his back and hit his head. Remember that Rodrigo is an old man, so any kind of fall is, well, not a good thing, as we all know, for old people. And then the poison from this apple drips steadily into Rodrigo's mouth until he eventually dies from the very poison he tried to use against Cesare. Ezio does arrive on the scene eventually, although Ezio was going to Rodrigo in order to kill him, but obviously misses his chance, and instead closes Rodrigo's eyes and confirms that the Pope is now indeed dead. Again, you would know this if you played Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood, but you clearly didn't. So you're trying to use this gotcha of saying that you kill the Pope in 2 to ruin the plight of Japanese players here, but in fact you're wrong. And your facts aren't even correct, and you really do not know what you're talking about at all. Again, I'm not surprised because you are one of those safe industry shill content creators on YouTube who will jump as high as these corpos tell you to. But if you're going to insult players, Japanese ones specifically, you should probably try to get your facts straight when you think you got some sort of gotcha. You're wrong, Hokage, not that you will admit it either way, but at least you've just told everyone that you know nothing about Assassin's Creed and have never played the games yourself, clearly. Yet another industry person who doesn't play video games. Color me shocked. Are we surprised by this? Not really, but let's keep moving. The general consensus that is the gotcha, so to speak, is that Assassin's Creed has never been historically accurate. Which in some cases, yeah, that is true, but it was depending on what exactly was being bent in a historical sense, so to speak, in order to make the story work. For example, Ezio knowing people like Leonardo da Vinci and others at the same time, or how Connor seems to run into people like George Washington or Charles Lee and more, is probably not very likely to happen, but it's a fun twist because it allows you, the player, to interact with these real-life people that did exist during those time periods. A bad twist on history would be playing Odyssey and then finding a machine gun that lets you shoot grenades. Obviously, this would be very stupid and completely out of touch with the time period. The only way that this would make any sense is if Alexios found an Isu artifact gun or something, but thankfully Ubisoft hasn't done that, yet anyways. However, I do think when it comes to historical accuracy, you need to ensure that you keep the core facts straight and right. For another example, I saw many people trying to use Assassin's Creed Valhalla as a gotcha against Shadows. How come it's okay to desecrate sites of worship and raid them like you're seeing on screen right now, but when Shadows does it, it's problematic? The simple answer is that the reason why Valhalla doing it is okay but Shadows isn't is because in Valhalla, you are obviously playing as a Viking warrior. And we know through historical texts, and you've probably seen it on the many shows or media that also depict Viking characters and their sagas, that the Nordic Vikings did in fact raid many villages and capitals across Europe specifically at the height of their power. And obviously we know that Vikings raided the hell out of England specifically, which yes, Valhalla takes place in primarily for good reason. So seeing Vikings raiding a holy site of worship within England and plundering it of its goods and resources is not problematic, because that is quite literally what would have happened back then by the character and the origin that they have that you are clearly playing as in that game. The problem with Yasuke doing it, well, for one, we already know that Yasuke's entire history was fabricated by a white man named Thomas Lockley, and that this guy did consult on Shadows, and we also know that Thomas Lockley has been exposed aplenty already for confirming that the majority of his so-called historical accuracy when it comes to Yasuke is nothing but a fabrication he created to push a narrative to sell books for profit. So in its entirety, Yasuke is not even really supposed to be there, nor be a samurai doing things in Japan. Again, for the 20th time, Yasuke was bought by Oda Nobunaga, saw Oda get overthrown by Akechi Mitsuhide, his general. Yasuke would then run away to Oda's son, and then Oda's son would commit seppuku at Akechi's behest. And then Yasuke was taken by Akechi and given back to the Jesuits, and he was never seen again and would leave Japan forever. That is, based on the only actual historical text that we have on the guy, the real truth behind Yasuke. He was about as much a real samurai as I am a real-life astronaut, which is that he wasn't, because I sure as hell haven't been to space. Any other claim told or pushed to spin a story about this guy is a fabrication. Sure, people will say, well, aren't every hero's story in Assassin's Creed games a fabrication? Why is this any different? The difference here is that they are taking someone who has been historically confirmed to not be what Ubisoft says he is, and then making him that thing, a samurai in this case, despite him not being one. It would be like Assassin's Creed claiming that Genghis Khan was an airline pilot who flew all around the world, despite the fact that Genghis Khan in fact did not fly any planes because planes weren't invented yet, and that would be a lie obviously. Claiming that Yasuke was a real-life samurai is ridiculous, and within the confines of this world that Ubisoft has created here, It's very important that they always ensure that at the very least that the bare fundamental things are kept intact. Like I said in my previous video, Mirage is set in the Islamic city of Baghdad, so obviously having any women in power or women guards would be a deliberate change on Ubisoft's part that would be 100% factually incorrect. They didn't do that, by the way, which is smart of them, and it's why Mirage came out and then people either bought it or didn't, and then time passed and we all moved on. But in terms of Japan, you need to understand why this is so problematic. It isn't so much as saying, well, you don't need to break the shrines or desecrate the sites of Japanese gods. It's more so the fact that Ubisoft even allows you to do these things in the first place. Does that make sense? Ubisoft should have had the foresight to look at the region that they were adapting and go, okay, Japan is a very strict country when it comes to their ideals and customs. For an example, that happened just a few years ago to show you what I mean. You know the series Like a Dragon or Yakuza, if you're old like me? Okay, well, they made a spin-off series for that game at one point that was called Judgment. It was a game that used a lot of real-life people's faces and voices within the game. For example, the main character Yagami was based on the real-life actor's face Takuya Kimura, as you can see here with the side-by-side. Yeah, same guy. Okay, so there was this one other character, a villainous one in the game, that's called Kyohei Hamura. Hamura was voiced and his face was based off the real-life actor Pierre Taki. Well, in 2019, Judgment was actually pulled from being sold within Japan when Pierre Taki was found in possession of drugs. Cocaine to be exact. Pierre got caught, the police arrested him, and he was being prosecuted for facing up to 7 years in jail. Sega, in light of this, would pull Judgment and issue an official statement as IGN provided here. And eventually, in the coming months, Kyohei Hamura's face and voice were changed to erase Pierre Taki from Judgment completely, and then the game was sold again in Japan. Now, why the big reaction, you may be asking? The reason is because, like I said, Japan is clearly not like North America. They do not see drug possession or really any crimes of any kind as just an oopsie, so to speak, like other countries do. We've all heard plenty of stories of actors in America who have been busted for drugs and other illicit acts, yet they don't lose roles and they just keep on working. But in Japan, being caught doing or selling drugs is akin to basically being accused of murder because, again, Japan is very strict on their customs and traditions. You can disagree or not that Sega's reaction to Pierre Taki was too much or not, but that doesn't matter because if you're not Japanese and don't live there, you don't really have a say in any of this anyways. The point remains that Japan is very protective of these things. If you get caught doing anything illegal there, you're basically cooked is what happens to you. So why am I explaining this Judgment story to you when this video is about Assassin's Creed? It's simple. It's to convey to you as to why these people claiming that the desecration of historical monuments within Shadows is a nothing burger to them, when actually it's anything but that. What Ubisoft has allowed the player to do here, whether you do it or not, the fact that it exists and it is allowed to be in the game, shows their gross incompetence towards understanding both the historical accuracy of their game and the traditions and culture of Japan as a country. You may not see it as a big deal, so what if Yasuke can destroy some stuff? Of course people outside of Japan would think this way, cause every day they probably see someone getting shot or hit by a car or places getting robbed in broad daylight and it's business as usual to them. But you need to understand that in Japan, these incidents are considered very rare and are taken with extreme measures to ensure that they do not happen. If you get caught shoplifting in, let's say, America, it's maybe a slap on the wrist, but you would be cooked in Japan if you go out of line. This is obviously why whenever you see someone post online that, oh wow, I can walk around Japan at night and nobody harasses me. Yeah, dummy, there's a reason for that, because their country actually values the safety and goodwill of their citizens. I can't even walk downtown in, say, Calgary, Alberta without someone probably either hassling me or trying to kill me if I'm walking downtown at night, and I'm sure it's the same in other parts of the world too. The point is that the people trying to claim this is nothing are not viewing this from the perspective of a Japanese person or their culture. They are viewing this sacrilegious act of vandalism through the eyes of their North American experiences. And because of that, they are not only proving exactly why this must be called out, but they are also showing everyone how grossly out of touch they are when it comes to the concept of respecting other countries' traditions and cultures. For an example, when you enter a mosque, is it not mandatory to take your shoes off? Imagine if someone entered a mosque and refused doing that, and instead they ran past everyone, stomping their shoes everywhere, and then started to burn the books down inside. You would immediately understand that what was being done is clearly a violation of Islamic traditions. But the only reason you would understand that is because you've seen the consequences dealt upon people, even in the Western world, for performing such acts in real life. A man literally died recently for burning the Quran in public, by the way, in case you didn't know. That's real, go look it up. So it puzzles me why these same internet types can see something like the burning of a religious text and immediately understand that, yeah, that's probably not a good idea, but are also not able to understand that what Ubisoft has done here is effectively the digital version of the very same thing. I asked the question, why is it okay to be disrespectful to Japanese culture but not other ones? If you see this as nothing, you are simply failing to understand the problem here. It is not some gotcha people are trying to place to rile others up. It's a legitimate act of cultural vandalism and should not be allowed in the game. Whether you agree with that or not is void, the fact remains regardless. I hate seeing people spit or attack traditions or cultures of any kind. I don't think it's right as an outsider to comment on why it's okay to destroy stuff or vandalize the traditions or cultures of other people, and then call people real-life losers like that Black Hokage guy did, who again clearly has not played Assassin's Creed to begin with. And you would have another person commenting on this too who would say things like, you control the buttons you press, this is like Anita Sarkeesian dragging the bodies of stripper NPCs around in Hitman. You guys became what you hated. No, this is not the same at all. You're comparing one culture and their lack of laws or whatever and the rampant crime against that of a structured society with thousands of years of tradition. Comparing the two is moronic and pointless, and you are just proving that your own gross incompetence at being able to sympathize or understand the rights and traditions of cultures that are outside of your own because you are not an active participant in that said culture. I'm honestly ashamed of so many people out here who have been blasting Japanese culture for being so up in arms about this. You are all failing to understand why this is not a good look for Ubisoft. It is literally if you could burn the Quran in Assassin's Creed Mirage. That's what this is. And if you could do that in the game, it would rightfully upset these very same people claiming that this is some grifter argument. But then, the same people could use the same argument against you as well. Well, you control the buttons you press and all that. But maybe, just maybe, these things shouldn't be in these games to begin with. Have you ever thought that being the right way to go about these things? And before anyone starts to claim that ENDYMION is for censorship, no, this is not censorship. This is common sense and respecting the values of a culture that many of us are not 100% familiar or in tune with. Censorship would be me claiming that we need to cover up women in, say, Stellar Blade or something, which obviously I'm against that sort of censorship. Just look at my channel for many examples on that. But there's a clear line between what is acceptable versus what is blatantly being done to use someone's culture like a punching bag like this. And if you can't see the difference between why that is a bad thing, then you need to understand that before you comment on such things and brush them off, that this is what leads to further extreme examples of cultures not being respected in the future. Which in turn feels ridiculous because these same people will scream from the rooftops about how things get appropriated by other people. But then it's convenient how it's only ever a problem when it's their culture that is the target of these damaging actions. But when it's someone else's, LOL. Just get over it, chud. It doesn't matter. It's just a game anyways. You can't be that stupid, and this should never be normalized. I can't believe there's actually people out here defending this when we all know if you made fun of or did something like burning their country's flag, they would blow a gasket. Common sense is thankfully becoming more common, but right now this entire controversy has proven to me that a lot of these people are still lacking the critical thinking parts of their brains, and it's really sad to see how people truly don't understand why Japanese people are mad about this. This is why I wanted to make this video in the first place, to douse these idiotic flames of terminally online weirdos who can't form their own opinions but just parrot what their favorite content creators say. I always tell you guys to form your own opinions. Do your own research and question anything and everything you see, because these days there's misinformation aplenty. Hell, even I got some things wrong about stuff like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I admit it, none of us are perfect. But this is not the way things should be going. Japanese players deserve their culture being respected by Ubisoft, and instead their traditions and customs are being used like a playground by morons to perform sacrilegious actions within a controlled environment. We need to be better than this. We need to understand why these things must be addressed. Anyone claiming otherwise is just ignorant to the actual reasons. I really can't believe people are out here comparing Shadow's shrines getting ruined to Valhalla's raids. Like, my god, guys, read some history to know there's a difference between both acts here, and if you can't tell the difference, at least Google why Japan is so headstrong on their traditions. Let me explain another one of Japan's traditions that I already know Ubisoft would screw up if they tried to implement it. So there's a show out there called Shogun. In episode 5, Blackthorn, who's a British sailor, he's also one of the main characters, is handed a pheasant as a gift by Toranaga for training his soldiers in British naval warfare. Blackthorn then hangs this dead bird outside of his residence because back then people would let the dead animal almost rot, so to speak, before cooking and eating it. The reason why? Apparently because the meat would taste more ripe once it was cooked if the game meat was allowed to mature, so to speak, by hanging it outside like that. Again, don't ask me, I wouldn't eat it myself, but that's how they did it back then. Anyway, Blackthorn hangs this dead bird and tells his servants, who are Japanese and were given to him by their lord to serve him, to not touch the bird hanging outside his home. He tells them in Japanese, if touched, die. He means it more as a joke, but you need to understand that Japanese people, especially back then, saw things only in a literal sense. And honor was more important above any and all things. The basic lesson of episode 5 of Shogun is that Blackthorn severely underestimates the importance of honor within 17th century Japan with his words and actions. The village headman eventually orders Yujiro, who is Blackthorn's gardener and servant, to remove the pheasant cause it stinks. Which he does because he was commanded by someone of authority, but after doing so, Yujiro is reprimanded because he went directly against the orders of his master, in this case Blackthorn, who said if you touch the rotting bird, you will die. This creates a moral conundrum that results in the other servants and Yujiro being distraught by the fact that he acted against the orders of his master, being forced to take his own life as payment for disobeying Blackthorn's direct commands. Blackthorn eventually returns to his residence mortified, not so much that his bird is gone, but that Yujiro, a gentle and kind gardener, would go to such extreme lengths for what in Blackthorn's eyes was nothing but the removal of a dead bird hanging from a string. But this story in Shogun, and why I'm telling you this, is to convey to you the difference in how the West, in this case Blackthorn, sees a defiance of order, versus that of Yujiro, who obviously represents the East and Japan's customs. The Japanese as a culture are so intrinsically tied to their culture and traditions that defying their master's will in any way is punishable by death during this period of time. Now, whether you agree or disagree with Yujiro's actions in this show or the book, I guess it doesn't really matter. Because how the Japanese gardener acted was how people saw and treated their customs within Japan. But as a Westerner, you're listening to this and probably thinking, why would he end himself? It's just a bird. Just go get another bird. And that, my friends, is why this whole discussion and these examples need to be presented so people understand, which is that cultures are different. They just are. You can complain, rebel, or say whatever you want, but ultimately there's a reason why every group of people have their own customs and ways. Now take everything I just explained. Assassin's Creed Shadows, by the way, that takes place in 1579. Shogun, the show I just explained to you, that takes place in 1600. Roughly 20 years after the events of Shadows if we want a time frame here to compare. Now you tell me how Ubisoft has been respectful to Japanese culture when a show and novel like Shogun, which detail to excruciating details and degrees, just how rigid and formed the Japanese culture was at the time, would allow someone to run around not only killing citizens without remorse, but to desecrate holy sites. The answer is that it would not, and Ubisoft and the people defending these actions, or at the very least the ability to do so, do not understand how grave of an error this is on Ubisoft's part. I do hope I was able to show you why this needs to be respected. They're making a game during a time where people thought in the literal and customs were so strong and protected that you would be beheaded for speaking out. Again, actually, in Shogun, here's another example. There's one warrior that ends up having to commit seppuku early on during the series because he speaks out against his lord's equals in a conversation. Tadayoshi, that's the name of the samurai under the rule of Toranaga, the main character of Shogun. Like I said, he speaks out during a conversation in episode 1, and this is considered such a grave error on his part that not only is Tadayoshi forced to commit seppuku for dishonoring his lord, but his son, a literal baby by the way, is also given as sacrifice in payment, and the child's life is taken by government officials for speaking out against the lords within Japan during this conversation. Yeah, that happens. Is it insane? Absolutely, and if you're a Westerner watching this, which trust me, for me, it was crazy, But this is how strict Japan's customs are. It's like the current world equivalent of two CEOs speaking, and then a manager speaks up and says, "Let my CEO talk, you've talked enough. And now you gotta end yourself and your firstborn as payment to the CEO you just spoke out against." And again, this is a story that is based on real historical customs and text that takes place 20 years after Shadows. Basically, Ubisoft screwed up really badly here, allowing these things to even exist in their game pretty much to begin with. And they have absolutely no care or want to understand the people of Japan or their customs with Shadows, and that is very clear. As for people claiming that Ubisoft is in the right here and the Japanese players are wrong, you frankly just don't understand Japanese culture at all, and look, I'm no master of their culture either. But even I know that if a literal foreigner clad in samurai armor ran around killing citizens and desecrating historical sites in 1579 was something that actually happened, Yasuke would be found, quartered, and fed to the wolves for his transgressions, and that's probably the least of the damage they would do to him before killing him. Hopefully this video has shown you why this is such a grave mistake on Ubisoft's part, and maybe if someone doesn't understand it, you can share this video to them so they can too understand as well. Even in Ghost of Tsushima, you can't desecrate historical sites, you can only attack enemy Mongols and other enemy types like rabid animals. Because at least Sucker Punch knew how ridiculously out of touch they would be if they allowed such heresies to exist in their Japanese open-world adventure game. In the end, people need to understand that sometimes if you don't know what's going on, that you should maybe shut up and not say anything instead. This entire controversy is not overblown. Japanese people absolutely have every right to be upset. And if you think otherwise, just know that if you're not Japanese, it's not really your place to dictate whether actual Japanese people are allowed to be upset about this or not. Oh my god, that was a lot, but thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, subscribe, and have a great day. I hope I was able to shed some light for you guys on these things so people can better understand, and I'll see you in the next video.